Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Kai Hornung, an internationally awarded landscape photographer based in Germany, is known for his emotionally rich imagery and signature sense of calm. Blending technical precision with a deep personal vision, Kai's Finding Small philosophy encourages a mindful approach to photography, focusing on overlooked details and subtle visual narratives. His work has been featured in National Geographic, Condé Nast Traveller and other leading publications, earning him widespread recognition in the landscape photography world. Originally trained in human resources, Kai picked up his first DSLR in 2008 and has since built a life rooted in artistic expression. He discusses the emotional motivation behind his images, the importance of authenticity, and how he strives to evoke a sense of presence in each frame. Beyond the field, Kai shares candid thoughts on the challenges of pricing work, navigating professional photography as a career, and staying true to one's creative voice. His experiences as an author, mentor and speaker offer further perspective on building a meaningful and sustainable practice in a fast-changing industry. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day Kai, welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, Grant? Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very good, and all the better for talking to you and meeting you for the first time, Kai. Thanks for agreeing to be
Likewise.
on the show. Been a fan of your work for a long time, and I know quite a few listeners, fans. I think there was a couple of people that actually suggested you in a poll I did a
Wow.
little while ago. Plus, you were
Thank you so
also,
much.
I think you were nominated by a couple of other guests in past episodes. You've been on my list for a little while, but we finally got around to it.
That's good to hear. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. I'd like to start with what photography means to you. What is it in your life?
It's been a great part of my life, and it is a great part of my life. It has never been my first hobby or my first job. First of all, I'm a professional photographer. It is a side career. 4 days a week, I'm a professional in the HR side of things in the financial industry.
Uh-huh.
And 1.5 years ago, I decided to reduce my working hours to free time for my photography to
Right.
do that professionally. So my Friday is my photo Friday. That's what my colleagues say, and I do too. It started with a pretty big point in my life when I broke up with my wife, and eventually we divorced. And that gave me more free time than I was prepared to have back then. And I remembered I always had fun photographing. And I got my first entry level DSLR when my son was born back in 2008. And after that, I documented family travels. I started to play around with photos. My biggest hobby has always been music. I've been singer in bands
Okay.
ever since late teenhood. And when I come up with vocal lines or lyrics, I always had visuals in my mind, probably because I'm a kid of the 80s and I was brought up with music videos and MTV
Well,
and all that stuff that was something in the past. So photography, visuals, and all of that was always inside of me. And when I had more time, like I said, back in 2016, I went on a business trip to Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And I bought myself a new camera back then and wanted to play around. And I really got hooked. And once I was standing in this landscape in the at the Irish coast,
yep.
that bug really hit me. And ever since that, I always wanted to repeat that moment of being outside in nature, being by myself. It was a really hectic and not so positive time in my life. But I really got focused, I quieted down, and I like to be creative. And I guess we can talk about this a little further about how to be creative and what inspiration means,
Yeah,
because that's
absolutely.
always been my main thing in my life. And photography slowly crept in there
Mhm.
and took that time of my life and has never stopped ever since. And I guess I'm lucky I could make this hobby, that passion, a side career.
Yeah, nice. You talked just now about talking about inspiration. Let's do that. And
Yeah.
I guess I'm really interested in what things influence people, what inspires them and it could be a moment in time, it could be another person or another person's work, could be another form of art, could be music. And I'm
Yeah.
really interested in those sorts of things and how they influence what and how people shoot.
I think everything that interests you can inspire you.
Mm.
And this becomes part of your creative journey. It has shaped mine, and it's still shaping mine. When you do photography for a longer period of time, you hit certain stretches when maybe you are more creative, then you're less. Then I have stretches when I don't touch my camera for 3 months straight.
Mm.
And at first, that was an itchy, bad feeling because I was like, oh, I want to do something, but I do not feel it. And I think that's what's happening with every creative. It comes in curves, it
Yeah.
ebbs and flows. And then I pick up a book. I listen to music a lot and I make music. I've started to learn playing the guitar now. That's my big thing right now, actually. And as I said, I still sing in a band and I write lyrics. That has shaped my inspiration. So just recently, I returned from a photo workshop in northern Spain just 3 days ago. And during that travel, I finished listening to an autobiography of Jimi Hendrix. And
Wow.
although I've never been that much into his music, I really enjoy listening to autobiographies of other people. And I think that's also inspirational. So, what happened to those people? How did they come about making what they are? What makes them be so determined and so passionate? And I think that's what shaped my photography, that I was really into it. Every free second I had, I spent on either photographing, on editing, on learning how to edit, on listening to podcasts, on watching videos, reading books, almost to a degree I would call almost unhealthy. But that helps you honing your craft, I believe. And
Yeah.
what inspires me, probably when I started as a little boy, I was drawing dinosaurs and volcanoes. And after that, I was drawing football players, or I wanted to become a tennis professional like Boris Becker was. All that kind of shaped me along the way. And these are these little nuggets that make you special. And when I'm on workshops and I'm trying to teach people photography, there's some starters who are just trying to handle the camera, and that's perfectly fine. Know how that feels because that's me trying to handle my guitar right now. And it's confusing, and you have got so much advice, and of course YouTube is a help, but then you get lost in 20 videos straight, and you're no more clever than before. So that's confusing. So it's good to have some help then. And once you master your camera and you have fun photographing, you kind of dial in your compositions. That's the people that I try to take aside and go, so what do you feel here? And I know that the confused look I see on their faces, like, what is he talking about? What do you mean feel? And then they start. When I remember one workshop, one guy said, I feel home because that coastline here, this is
Yeah.
almost near my home place. So I said, let's try to introduce this feeling into your next image. And he was completely confused and lost. What does that mean? So what do you associate with home? Calm and peace and being welcome.
Yep.
And I said, okay, let's see what we have here. I guess calm, you wouldn't take a short shutter speed now to freeze a wave breaking. You wouldn't have these dark clouds be really textured in your final shot because that's probably not calm. He said, oh, yeah, if you think about it this way, you're right. So we, in the end, we created a soft looking image that was inviting and had a sense of calm. And once you hit that, I think that really elevates your art and your visual language. And that's so much fun for me to teach. And once I realized that, and I asked myself, why do I photograph what I do, what I photograph, what I like? I remember standing in museums, standing in front of a large mural by Mark Rothko, and
Sure.
got sucked in. And I remembered, yeah, I've always had a thing for abstract art. So, of course, I like photographing this too. And I think this really made me a better photographer to reflect on myself, on why I do these things and what really interests me. And coming back to inspiration, I'd say inspiration is everything. It's
Mm.
it's making your life better.
Wow, that's awesome. You brought up a couple of topics there that really got my brain racing a little bit as well. One is, or the first one you brought up was about the obsessive behavior that's associated with, and it's not just photography, but many photographers that have been on the show have mentioned similar sorts of things. You have to be obsessed to get into it so far that it's what you want to do with your life.
Yeah,
And if you
true.
don't have that passion and that obsession, then you're never likely to be. It's not saying you can't be a great photographer, but you're never likely to be a great photographer because you're not going to put in the time, you're not going to put in the effort, and you're not going to put in the feeling
Yeah,
which was another thing you talked about.
I agree.
What's your feeling on that obsessive behavior? How many photographers have you come across that also reflect that?
Quite many. I think there's different levels to that.
Sure, sure.
I was half jokingly saying, well, maybe to an unhealthy stage. So let's talk about the normal people, like the guys that come to my workshops. And just imagine you as a listener, you go photograph and you take your camera gear and you take your partner who's not photographing on a little Sunday afternoon hike. And once you stop and photograph, if you have a lovely partner like my wife, she's very patient with me. Still, at some point, I feel maybe subconsciously, I should leave this shot be now and keep going. I remember one time she just grabbed my tripod and said, "Okay, you got enough of that shot now. You were working there for an hour." And that's the cool thing that maybe that's obsessive when you go, "Oh, I see how the clouds move. This light is changing. Just wait, maybe 2 or 3 more minutes."
Yep.
That's like probably fishing. And I don't have anything for fishing. So when people are just sitting there fishing, I go, this must be the most boring thing. But actually, what we do as photographers is probably similar. So
Very.
when I have these workshop groups and I go, don't worry, we'll take our time. And now you're here with like-minded people. Then if you wait another 15 minutes for a light to come, that's all right. We have that time. And I think this is the kind of passion, I'd say, rather than obsession, to enjoy what you're doing, to be completely in your zone and in yourself, actually, to enjoy what you're doing and to be really aware of your surrounding of nature, what happens around you, and later on, most likely, and what happens inside you too, how that makes you happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really resonated with me there with the understanding partner. My wife sometimes comes on a shoot with me. I'm often at a beach first thing in the morning. I'm on the east coast of Australia, so
Great.
sunrise is my jam. So if I'm up early and she's up early, she'll go off and she'll do a walk while I'm standing in
Mhm.
one spot for an hour and a half
Mhm.
trying to work that
It's
composition.
just how it is.
Yeah, that's just how it is. But when she comes back from that walk, I know, okay, doesn't matter what the light's doing, that's time. We're going to go,
Breakfast time. Yep.
yeah, go and have breakfast, and that's it. Photography's done for the day.
But sometimes that's good to have that voice of reason, right?
Absolutely. Because, yes, you could sit there and take another hour or two. And as you say, it is a bit like fishing, that nibble of
Hmm.
light coming, and you go,
Hmm.
okay, just 2 or 3 more minutes, and it'll be
Yep.
perfect. And
Yep.
sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't.
So to see the positive side of that, she just avoids that you end up being frustrated because the light will never happen.
That's
You
exactly
just
right.
miss out completely then.
That's exactly
Excellent.
right. Yeah. You talked a little bit about the feeling, and that is obviously very much linked to that obsessive behavior or the compulsion
Mhm.
or the passion that people will have. That feeling that people get is something that I think is very important for people to express in their photography. How do you try to capture your feelings in your photography?
That's a great question. I wish I had more time to do what I just preached myself, to allow myself be at a location by myself and just photograph. Interestingly enough, ever since I made that step to be a part-time professional photographer, it's many P's here, I photographed less, which I don't particularly enjoy. I'm happy that I can do this as a career, but I would like to photograph more. And when I'm on workshops, it's not about my photography, of course, it's about the clients.
Sure.
So when I have the chance to photograph, yeah, that's a good thing. How do I feel? I think I try to, let me put it in a different way. When I photograph, I find it more enjoyable to work intuitively instead of have pre-planned images in mind. I appreciate the planning side of things, like to be at that certain location, and I know when the sun rises, and I can check PhotoPills or any other app and see where the sun will be at what time exactly. But I much rather prefer reacting intuitively once I'm on location. That could mean the light is not working in my favor, so I'm just gonna shoot into a completely different direction. And later on my computer, when I see these image files, there's and something interests me in that image, and I pick that up to edit. There comes the point when I switch my file from Lightroom into Photoshop,
Yep.
and I have to save that file because when that crashes and I have 10 layers on top, it's just, yeah, waste of time. So when I save the file, I don't give it a name, image number 3200. I try to give it a name as if it was a song title. So it has to have a meaning to that image. And that's when I start asking myself, so what do I feel here? What do I see? What's the story about this image?
Mm.
And then I think then it comes full circle. Then I discover for myself, why did I actually take this photograph? What do I see here? What made me react intuitively, pick my tripod, maybe frame the composition, wait for light, and click. And that's the moment where I peel it off like an onion and go, okay, that's what I felt. Maybe I was frantic. Maybe I was really at peace with myself.
Yeah.
Maybe I see a story as if that was a David Fincher movie. I don't know. And then I try to shape the image into that direction.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. I tend to do it the other way round. I tend to
Hmm.
name it after I'm finished editing, and that's when I say, okay, this is what I'm getting out of what I've done. The path to get there depends on what sort of image it is. If it's a seascape or an architecture shot or a
Hmm.
forest scene with a waterfall or something. But all of those feelings come into the end product for me, where I'm actually saying, okay, this is what I'm going to call this now, rather than at the beginning.
And how
So
do you introduce feeling before that when you're on location?
very much it's about trying to replicate the scene in a way that reflects how I'm feeling in the moment.
Hmm.
And one of the nice things about I live in Sydney in a big city, so I know from experience going out to some of the beaches that I go to, I could be one of three or four people on that entire stretch of beach, which could be a mile long. And so therefore I know that I'm experiencing something that 99.9 repeater percent of Sydney is not seeing. And so I'm trying to convey, hey guys, here's what you're missing out.
Okay.
Is one thing. That's like that's a broader theme to a lot of my work, but it's also trying to introduce that feeling of, because there's a lot of seascape, or even if I'm doing a waterfall, I'm standing in water usually up to my
Hmm.
knees, sometimes up to
Hmm.
my waist, sometimes up to my chest, depending on what sort of water we're talking about. And so getting that feeling of being wet is important. So you'll almost always see water coming past the lens of the camera, sometimes into the lens on a few shots, which is a bit hairy sometimes. I've killed a few cameras that way. But the feeling that I'm trying to convey is that feeling of moving water, moving atmospheric conditions in that time. And it could be dramatic depending on how I'm feeling and what the sky is showing me, or it could just be excitement from the try to add some dynamism by doing a slightly longer exposure, say for the sky to get cloud movement
Yeah. Yeah.
streaking, but a shorter exposure for the water, because if I go too long there, it just moves out and you lose a lot of that. But then also, I'm also doing very early shots, early morning shots pre-sunrise. We're talking up to an hour before sunrise, where I might have the shutter open for 7 minutes just to catch
Well.
that
Hmm.
weird
Hmm.
glow that you get before
Hmm.
sunrise, and
Hmm.
capture as much light as possible.
Yeah,
And dead flat water, and that those images have their own feeling, and to me
certainly.
they border on abstract depending on how far I've zoomed into the scene or whatever. And so for me, that feeling is, it's a broad range, but it's really about trying to capture how I'm feeling at the moment,
Mhm.
pretty much as you said.
Quite some time ago, I read an article that called it extracting moments in time, which maybe at first sounds a bit flat, but like you said, when you take a 7 minute exposure, you create a moment of time that we as humans are not able to see because
Correct.
you have the change of light. Also, when we have receding waves with maybe just a half a second of exposure time, that's still not what we see as humans. So we're shaping images with
Hmm.
time also that are different to what we actually experience as people. That's also interesting. That's not my approach. It's not why I photograph or enjoy these
No,
scenes.
no.
Thinking about it that way, I found that was interesting. Also, maybe to have a thousandth of a second to have that split drop of a break in wave. it's also not what we see. And that's also interesting if you consider your photography that way. And not even going into photojournalism, where you also capture moments of time where something really important happens. That's another layer, another meaning to the quality of photography, and also another layer that gets people really excited doing this. And absolutely get that. It's fun and it's great to have these moments of time as a collection. Good to have them on your hard drive, even better as a print on your wall or maybe as a photo book or whatever you prefer.
Yeah. Well, you touched on something there that I did a little bit in Vietnam. I've recently just got back from a trip there. And one of the things that I was experimenting for me, I know street photographers might do this all the time, but going completely manual, including manual focus, no autofocus, no
Hmm.
auto ISO, nothing. So setting ISO, setting up the shot before swinging around and taking a street scene of, might be a street vendor or a guy repairing a motorcycle or a scooter on the side of the road, which all over places in Vietnam. And
Hmm.
it's a different way of capturing that feeling and a different way of
True.
looking at how you're taking those photos. Because traditionally, for me, I would normally set up on a tripod, look at a longish exposure. I'm probably using an aperture priority, so I don't have to think too much about the
Mhm.
timing. But I know what aperture I want because
Mhm.
I want the focal length
Yeah,
from front
yeah,
to back. So I'll let the camera decide the timing. Sometimes I will, but I'm almost never. It's almost always autofocus as well, except night shots and
yeah,
astro and those sorts of things. But it was just a little bit different doing absolutely everything in manual in a street mode for me, which is not something that I've done a lot of in the past. And it's trying to extract, in my mind, it's just trying to extract a different way of looking at the way I'm taking photos and trying to work that then into the landscape genre. And it probably won't work 100% of the time, but that's okay. That's what
yeah. It
experimentation is
is
all about.
absolutely. And did you get some images where you felt like, the focus wasn't quite right, but you
Yep.
still liked the image because it was
Yeah.
conveying a feeling? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're talking here now, it's technical stuff, but that's not what really excites me about photography. And I know exactly what you were talking about because a week before I left for Spain very recently, I got myself a small Fuji camera to just shoot scenes like this, really without much thinking, just handheld and then point and click more or less.
Yeah.
And I ended up with a few shots that I just saw from Bilbao, for example, street scenes. Not a good focus because I had it on autofocus, but it didn't really work. But it looked good because that the blurred subject, you can still recognize what it is.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
conveyed a strong feeling and a sense of motion. And for the listener, if just think of your favorite movies. How do light and shadow interact with each other? What does it make with you if the main actor maybe is not completely in focus? That can create interest and mood and tension. So why not introduce that in our photography? I know
Absolutely.
that's a bit more difficult in landscape photography because we're so used to have that all sharp. Let's not even go into focus stacking. That's where you have it sharp all the way. And I'm usually too lazy to do that.
Same.
But I know the quality of
I quite often take the shots, but I'm too lazy to stack it all together.
exactly that's me. So I always go with a safety shot with closed aperture first, which
Yep.
will most likely be the final result. And then I
Yep.
take the focus stacked versions that will never see the light of day. Yeah, but maybe that's something for us landscape photographers. Let's be more creative, be more open for the imperfection and
Mm.
see what happens, how that feels. This may sound like I'm overthinking everything I'm doing when I'm photograph, which is not the case at all. Like I said earlier, when I'm out photographing, my head is pretty much the best moments are when I don't really have anything in my head, when it's just
Yeah.
flowing and I
Reacting to
don't overthink at all.
what's happening in
Exactly,
front of you.
reacting. Yeah. And that thought process that comes later, like I explained.
Yeah. Yeah. I usually think a little bit about changes. There's sometimes, which is one of the reasons why I rely on aperture priority a bit, is because I know if I make an ISO change or if I make an f-stop change, then
Mhm.
I know where I'm going to end up. And I can actually, the camera actually tells me what shutter speed I'm going to get anyway, just with a half press. So I know what I'm going to get. So I can
Mhm.
aim and staying within that f-stop range of, say, 7.1 to 16 and rarely going outside of that. What I very much did differently in as much as the other manual changes, I pretty much, for all of the shots that I did, shot wide open with an f2.8 or an f4 lens. And the whole point of that was experimenting with depth of field. So that is why I was doing manual focus, to try and get the depth of field change that I wanted in the background, so that you were focusing very much on that person, be it street vendor or motorcycle repair person or whatever, so that they became very well defined in the image, and the rest of the image just blended into cream at the background. And that very deliberate thinking before I started actually going out and taking shots, and then just taking shots that way and then reacting to what I was seeing, was really, for me, the magic source of what I was thinking about. I also did some of my traditional stuff where I could, but I wasn't by the sea very often where I could just walk down to a nice sunrise. It just wasn't where I was located in the places that I was at.
That's a good thing, to just introduce some change and be
Absolutely.
playful. Yeah,
Play around, experiment, and do something
exactly.
you're not always doing. Because the
Yeah,
thing is, if you do always do what you're doing, you end up getting into a creative rut, and you start to be less inspired to go out and take shots.
exactly.
How
Last
do you?
year, I went on a half honeymoon, half photo tour together with my wife. It was 3 weeks with a camper. We went south. So we drove from Germany through Switzerland, France, down to Spain, and then Portugal, all around. And sometimes like visiting large cities like Barcelona but I don't bring my camera gear in there, then that wouldn't make sense. So I just used my iPhone, and I had a little app called Spectre, I believe, which allows me to do longer shutter speeds. So
Okay.
we went through little streets, or it was just standing there at crowded places, and had a shutter speed of maybe 5 seconds, which ends up being a street scene with people moving. And I called this to myself like a series of the ghosts of Barcelona. And
Nice.
so I enjoyed that. It didn't bother my wife. She was happy strolling around. I had my little phone in the hand, and I took a little handheld 5 second shot. Everybody was happy.
You
And
weren't
I still
you
played
weren't
around.
having to set
Yeah.
up a tripod or anything and get in the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So there's always a shot to be taken.
Absolutely. What was the first landscape photo that made you say, okay, this is it? What was that moment like?
Coming back to Ireland, that's not necessarily a great photo, but I remember one that was like the kickoff to my landscape photography. And when I spent lots of time trying to hone my editing, I think I had an image from the Baltic Sea where I felt like, okay, this looks like a direction I would like my editing to be going to. It has certainly evolved ever since, and I have a different workflow than I did back then. But I remember that one specific image, not really a great scene, actually. It's waves coming in on a stormy day, but the editing was fine. And I would say that was probably the point where I felt like, okay, now I have a direction.
Yeah.
And there's another one. I remember maybe 3, 4 years ago, people were reaching out to me and were like, "Oh, you started taking more intimate and abstract photographs now." And I tried to tell them, no, actually, that has been the case ever since. Actually, even before my landscape photography, I did that. But when I had this like workflow or my direction of editing, it was usually these more dramatic, more epic scenes. And my editing workflow was always pointing into that direction. So when I had a calmer scene, a smaller scene, I felt a bit helpless in how to process these images. So I
Right.
remember I was sitting on a boat at Kuh in Bavaria together with my photo friends. We were on a photo tour in the Alps, and there were these small ripples running away from the boat while I was sitting on it, crossing the lake. And it was all covered with fog. So all you had in your frame was ripples beneath and then just nothing on top.
Sure.
And I instantly felt like this is going to be a series I'll be doing. That
Okay.
was 2017. It took me until 2020 when COVID hit and I digged into my archive, when I felt comfortable editing this. And then when I had the feeling like now I reached the point where I can edit an image in a way it deserves, no matter if it's a dramatic scene, if it's more subtle. And I really strongly remember that moment when I finally nailed that and I felt, okay, now I can actually I handle my camera. It's just like using a hammer to have a nail in your wall.
Yep.
Once you hang your image, you never will remember the moment you put the nail into the wall because it's just
That's
an
right.
act you do on the way. It's the same when you take an image. Once you manage your camera, I just do it intuitively. Usually on manual. I pick the aperture and go for that and set accordingly. That's not what photography is about. It's the final result. And having the feeling like, okay, now I know what to do in the field and I also know what to do in the editing side of things,
Yeah.
that made me feel like, okay, I've reached a point where I can start expressing and I don't have to worry about the manuals.
I think that's a really good point. Once you've gotten the technical aspects of actually taking a photo and you're capturing consistently capturing good quality images, and you've got a bit of an understanding about composition. And I'm talking when you're in that learning phase. But
Yeah.
once you've actually mastered the tool, then you can concentrate on a lot of the inspirational aspects
Hmm.
and the creative side. You can explore the world of photography in the way that you want, because
Exactly.
what you're doing, as you said, it is
Yeah.
like hitting a nail with a hammer. You don't think about it anymore. That stage where you get to be unconsciously competent, as they call
Yeah.
it. And you go
And
through the phases of being consciously incompetent. You know that you don't know what you're doing, to getting to that last phase of being unconsciously competent, and you're
Mhm.
basically then on your way.
Yeah. And I have a guitar hanging there. I'm at that stage where I'm still looking at my fingers and how to play the chords. So that is a definite reminder on how things are difficult when you start out. And you
Absolutely.
have to pay more attention to get the techniques until you start hearing what you're actually doing. And maybe you can close your eyes and play just by feel. I'm not there with my camera yet. With my with the camera, I believe I am, but with the guitar yet.
Yeah.
And that's also another interesting thing. I remember when so many people reached out to me, that was more like 3, 4, 5 years ago, and how or what advice I would give to be great at photography fast. And the question was, what shortcut can I tell? And I believe there are none. I
There's
mean,
very few.
it
Yeah.
is a craft. Of course, if you're all just for the final result, don't even buy a camera. Go
Yeah.
on Midjourney or whatever, type a prompt, and you gotta produce image. Why worry about all of this?
That's
But
right.
coming back to what we started with, that creative journey, what shapes you, the inspiration. Every time I fail, that's also an experience I pick up. And of
Yeah.
course, it's not fun. It's not that I that I chase failures. I try to chase the successions. But every time I fail with images, and God knows I do often, that's also something on my creative journey and it shapes me and the frustration that comes with it. And I strongly believe that makes me better next time. And if it doesn't make me better next time, then maybe I have to try harder or
Yeah.
let one image go and go for another one and experience that. That's also, isn't it the same with life? And
Absolutely.
we both have seen
Driving a car,
artists
riding a
where,
bicycle, learning to cook,
yeah,
all of those
yeah,
things. There are no shortcuts to it. You will get the hang of it eventually, but don't put the time into understanding the mechanics of it. And by mechanics, you working out for photography in particular, working out how to set your camera up properly for the shot that you
yeah.
want to take. And I think a lot of people have that difficulty in both aspects of photography, both the field work but also the editing side, where
Hmm.
they're not sure what it is that they want to express in their photography. They know they
Exactly.
want to take
Yeah,
they know they want to take a nice photo. They
yeah,
know they want to express something, but they may not be sure what that is, because
yeah,
it does take time to recognize that in yourself, and it takes time to
absolutely.
understand your own feelings about photography, to say, okay, these are things that work for me. These are things that make me want to go out and take a shot at four
Totally.
o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning for Astro, for example.
Yep. The
But,
people who have worked with me on workshops or maybe online mentorings or whatever, they can probably sing what I'm about to say now. Because my first question when doing an image critique is usually, so what's your image really about? What's
yeah,
the story?
yeah,
And that face of confusion I usually get then is it was a beautiful morning and it was the last day of my trip, and I'm go like, yeah, that's great, but nobody will ever know because that's not what the image is about. You
That's
can only
right.
see and if you, as a photographer, as an artist, if you're not clear what your image is about, how should your viewer understand it? So you have to really showcase what it is. What's your protagonist, your antagonist? What's the feeling you want to bring across? And you have to have that, or have at least a glimpse of that, to
Yeah.
have striking images. It's also something I already expressed, these more minimalist images or abstract images. It's been years now that I've started to write a book which will be called Finding Small, where I introduce all of this, like the creative journey and how to see these things. And I believe it is in most people already, but also most people have not recognized that yet, on how
Absolutely.
to really unfold this, on how to unfold that potential that sits inside them, and how to put the pieces of their own inspiration and what they're actually feeling together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that that quality of landscape and nature photography, to be outside there, I understand that for many people I have been in touch with, it there's many people who have dealt with difficult phases in their life. Like I said, I did myself. And there's people who maybe have been traumatized or really have battled depression or other things.
Yep.
They started photographing and they started to heal by that.
Mm.
And I'm in no way an esoteric person, but I think there is a quality to, like you said, go up early in the morning, go to to an empty beach and see the light come up. That makes something with you, and try to peel that out and introduce that into your photography. That makes, yeah, it makes you a happy photographer in the end, I believe.
Absolutely. And it is, I think, that feeling and understanding that feeling within yourself, which actually
Yeah,
makes you a better
yeah,
photographer.
yeah,
And knowing what you want to do then comes back to what you do in the field, what you then do in the editing suite afterwards. And you can actually bring the whole together, and
exactly.
you can actually start to get continuity. Not
Yeah,
And I don't mean shooting the same thing all the time or the same style necessarily all the time, but you can get continuity in your work through understanding what it is that you want to do.
yeah,
And by doing that, you can then actually harness your feelings into that expression, into the
yeah.
images that you're putting out.
For me, I believe that's probably for most people, it's not where you start with your photography.
Oh, absolutely
Like we
not.
said, to cover the technical side of things comes probably first, and
Mm.
then comes a phase that's probably also natural for us human beings, because remember, small children, when they paint something and they go, "Hey mom, look at this image I painted for you." You try to make others happy, but also get positive feedback. So there comes a phase where you want to show your images and your results. You're happy with yourself, you want to show it off, and you hope you get a positive response. Social media really feeds on that.
Mhm.
And that maybe comes with poisoned positivity, because these claps on your back are sometimes misleading.
Yeah,
Sometimes those
absolutely.
images that are really positive on social media, these oversaturated images, very dramatic, they get lots of likes. And for starters, that can be seductive to
Yep.
follow that route. But I think once you're past that, then comes the phase that we were talking about, to really look more into yourself and go, so what really makes me happy? Is
Yeah.
it winning contests? Is it winning likes and engagement? To me, the answer was no. I'm more content and more happy when I'm in the act of creating, when
Yeah.
I'm inspired, when I feel like this makes me happy doing. And I enjoy sitting here and making this image, or I enjoy being at this lonely beach and seeing the sunrise. And maybe even if I hadn't brought my SD card, of course I would be pissed. But then I still would be able to witness this beautiful moment. And
Yeah.
that's something for itself too.
I love the times when you have a location in mind and you drive a couple of hours to near the location and then hike another hour or two to a nice waterfall, say. This is, as you can probably tell, a true story. And you turn up and you pull out the tripod, and the tripod shoe is at home because you left it on a different body.
Yeah, I
Going,
know. I just
well,
said, yeah, it's still enjoyable, but I feel the pain quite literally. Yeah.
handheld it is, and it'll be fast shutter speeds because that's all I can do.
Second best sometimes has to do.
sometimes, yeah. But I think everybody has those moments.
Yeah.
What does success look like for you? Is it that happiness? Is it monetary reward? What is success in your photography?
First up, it would be being happy with what I'm doing. But once I decided to also embrace the professional side of photography, it has to be creating some income, truth be told. I have to take jobs with my photography to earn some money. Luckily, I'm in the position with my still four times in my main job inside human resources, I'm able to generate my main income there. The income from photography is not that I totally require it for my living. Still, I would like to create income, like I said. So I do workshops, I do assignments, but I've embraced the freedom to do it only when I feel like, okay, this is right to do.
Yeah.
I feel like doing this. This is fun. I just canceled a workshop that was planned to be in the Icelandic Highlands for this summer
Okay.
because the resulting price tag in the end was so high that I felt uncomfortable charging that.
Wow.
I felt like this is getting to a point where I don't feel like I can ask for such a price. People would feel like, okay, Kai's now getting greedy. Now he wants the big money. But truth be told, the prices have jumped so high for traveling costs that I felt, and my wife was telling me at some point, you're rejuggling the itinerary again. At some point, who are you doing this for? She asked me.
Yeah.
And then she gave the answer herself because it's obviously not for yourself, because you don't need to do that. And you try to make somebody happy, but that's not you. So ultimately, I decided, you're right. So I canceled that plan, although I invested many hours planning already. And I decided to call a friend who I had been photographing with for many tours. And I said, so how about we go for photography week to just
Mm.
photograph for ourselves? To shortly answer, it's mainly to be happy with being creative.
Yeah.
And if that pays some bills too, that's perfect.
Fantastic. I'm interested in that cost of workshops in particular. One of the really difficult things that a lot of photographers had is pricing their value, actually putting a price
Oh,
on the value that they're adding. So whether it's prints, whether it's photo engagements where you're going to do a corporate shoot or a wedding or whatever, actually understanding how to price yourself is a big challenge. How do you do that? And
absolutely.
clearly, you've actually thought a bit about it because you actually canceled something because it was going, this is too much. Nobody's going to pay
Yeah.
that. How
Yeah.
do you go about it? Do you have a system or is it just you're doing it by feel like most people?
A part of it is by feel, but also just seeing what my colleagues do and see what's the market.
Yeah.
And I try to maybe put myself on that landscape and see, okay, some people know me, but it's not like I'm the top of the cream, so I have to be somewhere maybe in the middle of
Mm.
things. And what do others charge? And then, of course, I have to see what are the fixed costs I have to cover.
Yep.
I have a travel agency who's partnering with me, so they take some of the legal stuff aside, but that also, of course, takes a piece of the cake
Yeah.
financially. So I have to, in the end, see, okay, I have my regular job. If, for example, I take some vacation off, I lose money on my main job.
Yep.
I have to cover that. I have two children that I'm responsible for financially. I have a wife. We have a dog now. I have to earn some money to make a living for all of us.
Sure.
And all of this comes into a package, and then you try to figure out a price that you feel like, okay, this can be sold on that market
Yep.
with my name probably. And for example, that Spain workshop I was talking about, I felt like I had an amazing tour set together. And the landscape up there in northern Spain is diverse. And I would say it's almost a wet dream of a landscape photographer.
Yeah.
Still, in the end, I didn't sell it out, which
Okay.
I thought it was decently priced. But you also have to take into consideration we are at a stage with economics, with politics right now,
Mhm.
which is difficult. And it's difficult for us landscape photographers. You could argue you are reaching out to people who have the money and they still want to spend it. Yeah, part of it is true, part of it is not true because that money still has to be earned. And I'm
Exactly.
not targeting the millionaires here who don't really care about anything, they can spend it all. I'm talking about the, that's not how to call that, the regular normal people who are still well off who can spend some money on their hobby.
Yeah.
So it's a fine balancing act, and you never really know if you nail it. You can tell if somebody buys your print, if somebody buys your online mentoring, maybe if somebody buys your workshop, then okay, that attracted at least that person.
Yeah.
But it's a tough
Well,
business, and
oh,
I get asked
absolutely.
often, when do you and why don't you do that full time? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to be dependent on that as my only income. It's tough, and I've seen colleagues drop out of this business, and I
Oh,
can understand
absolutely.
why.
I've seen people swing into it and swing out of it, and
Exactly. Yeah.
some don't come back to it. Some do because they've been able to
Yeah.
get a big enough financial cushion that they
Yeah.
can give it another go. But I think
And I
having
want to
that,
keep it fun. Like I said, that's the main priority
exactly,
to have to
yeah,
keep it fun. We both are at a stage in our lives where we've seen some years, and I've just turned 50. I don't, it's a different stage in my life than being 25 when you try to
absolutely,
earn yourself and be very ambitious in everything. I'm still ambitious. That's why I'm doing these things. But I'm also like, yeah, it has to be enjoyable and it has to be.
absolutely,
I know that inspiration, and now we come full circle with this conversation again. I know that inspiration is the main source that keeps me going also as a person.
mm,
And I don't want to threaten this, to have this photography thing that is really precious to me, that's important to me, turn into a just job. I think
yeah.
then I would lose something.
Yeah. There's been a lot of talk in the photography community, particularly about Iceland and some of the issues that its popularity have driven. One is just overcrowding in a lot of the honeypot places, all of the fosses that are now tour bus central. But that has also driven prices and also driven the accommodation price, food price, basically everything there, in addition to the overall global economic situation. How do you feel about those sorts of places having that happen to them?
Yeah, I think the question already gives it. It's halfway torn. First of all, I love being in Iceland. I think it's a wonderful country. I've always enjoyed being there, and I'm already looking forward to be there again. I have seen changes in places that are overcrowded. I don't agree on the discussion that Iceland is shot to death because there's still so many places that people usually don't go to.
Yeah.
And so there's certainly always something new to discover. And since there's so many diverse, different locations, I think it's still absolutely worth going there.
Yeah.
But yes, there's people depending on earning their money with tourism. And
Definitely.
Icelandic people, they're really practical. They one day they may be a plumber, and next day they are a tour guide. And the other day they're maybe prime minister. I don't know. That's also a quality of Icelandic people. I truly enjoy that. They're amazing people. I love them. But they know how to earn money too. And seeing that increase of pricing, it's difficult. And I think at some point they may reach a tipping point where tourism maybe will go a bit back.
Yeah.
That people will go, okay, now it's becoming that expensive. And if I stand at Skogafoss where the buses come in and then tourists just jump out for shooting selfies for 15 minutes and then they go away, that kind of ruins the experience of being
Yeah.
there.
The ambience is
Again,
not.
there's yeah, again, there's if you just walk for 15 minutes, you're all by yourself, and inside the natural beauty, there's no worries. But the guys who would just go for a drive-by, yeah, you might experience some crowded places that are also costly. And there's some areas they start charging for parking now. They start charging for to get in there. That probably applies to many of these hot locations. And that's probably something we just have to deal with as people.
Yeah.
And we photographers, we're part of the problem. Let's face
Oh,
it.
absolutely. Yeah.
If I share
We
an
make it
image,
popular.
yeah, if I share an image of a location that has not been known well so far, and that image turns sort of viral, more people get interested in going there. Yeah, I have to pick my own nose. I'm part of the problem. So I have to be careful also with sharing locations.
Without sharing the exact locations, do you have a
Yeah.
favorite spot that you keep going back to? Not just Iceland, but anywhere.
Just because it's so easy to go there. It's a local forest here, just 10 minutes
Nice.
away. That's probably the place I go to most often. I think I cherish the excitement of seeing new locations. So I don't really have a spot that I go to again and again, just to see how the light changes over the season. Yeah, I have that with my local forest here, but other than that, I could just name maybe larger areas. The Dolomites have always been fun. Now, northern Spain is awesome. Iceland, I like returning to those places, but it's not like I'm crazy to see Kirkjufjell, for example. Again, that's the hut-shaped or pyramid-shaped mountain with the
Very good.
waterfalls in front in
Yeah.
Iceland. Yeah, I skipped that from my last workshop because I think it has been done
It
already, and I
is hard
focus
to
on
get a
more hidden
unique
spots.
shot from there without going into
Yeah,
parts of the park and whatever that you're not meant to go to.
yeah, yeah. If I see interesting structures underneath my feet, I'm a happy person already. And then I go photographing like this. That's has been a running joke to some workshop participants when they look at me like, "Oh, Kai, there goes Kai again. He's
Yeah.
just standing there with camera tilted down, shooting some mud cracks or some oil on the water or something like this."
Nothing
And
wrong
you
with
can
that.
shoot this everywhere. No,
That's
absolutely not.
exactly right. Yeah. What is your most memorable shoot? One that really stuck out in your mind?
It's just because of the experience. I've only done this once. That was a Cessna flight over Iceland back in 2019. That stands out because I've done a lot of flying with commercial flights, but never in such a small plane. And then leaning out of an open window, photographing, that was special. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How about horror stories? Have you had any sketchy experience
Oh,
you'd like to tell us about?
also about a flight. Yeah. The same year, earlier that year, there was in, I think, February 2019, I was flying to Lofoten Islands in Norway. I was flying from Hanover, I believe, to Oslo. And in Oslo, my flight got canceled because of a thunderstorm that came in. And they gave me a little sheet of paper with a hotel. I grabbed my luggage and went out of the airport to grab a bus. And I asked the bus driver if he would go to that hotel. He said no. So I got back out. And I was like, so how do I find the right bus now? Went to a desk, asked them, and while she was checking, I was asking her, or is there maybe another way to still go to Lofoten Islands today? And she said, oh, let's check, because I knew that friends of mine were about to pick me up at an airport in northern Norway, and we still had a 5 hour drive from there. So I knew, and they were already there, if I missed that flight, they would have to go, and I would have to take a bus to take that drive. So she said, yeah, there's still a flight from Oslo to Bodø, which is just another half hour away from Lofoten Island. And I said, fine, I'll take that. Smooth flight. I even saw the aurora dancing from
Oh,
the window by my seat. And once we got down into the clouds, turmoil broke out. The plane really got bumped around. People were screaming, and I was like, oh boy, this is a special flight now. So we landed safely up in the north, but my knees felt shaking.
wow.
And I waited for my connecting flight. It's just a 20-minute flight over to Lofoten Island. My friends were already there waiting to pick me up, and I said, it's really stormy here. We wonder if you still get out. And I was at that little airport. All flights got canceled already except mine. So I looked out of the window, still felt my stomach and my knees, and there was a flag post. It was just like going in the storm. I was like, no way there's a plane leaving. But my flight got called out, and I
Wow.
was like, I'm not feeling too well. But of course, and then I
The
entered
pilot
that
was
small
obviously
plane.
feeling great.
Yep. Sat in there. I think all the other passengers were probably workers that were just going from land to land. Again, 20-minute flight. I hooked my earphones up. Didn't want to see anything, didn't want to hear anything. We got up, and the first bump that came, I had to grab the bag for the first time and only time ever. I filled
Wow.
up my first bag, I filled up the second bag. I was sitting there. We had a 90-minute flight, again, which was supposed to be 20 minutes, and we returned back from where we came.
Oh no.
And I left that plane. I must have looked like a zombie. I sure felt like one. And everything got canceled. I went to a hotel and I felt like I was almost half dead. The next day, still the ferry didn't go. And while I was sitting there at Lonely Harbor, there was one working woman. I was like, is there any ferry going to the Lofoten Islands today? Because and all flights got canceled because of
Mhm.
that huge storm. And she said, no, there's nothing going. But you know what? I just had a car of two people from Poland. They were in the parking lot and they asked me the same. They want to drive up there. Maybe you can go. And I don't speak Polish. They didn't really speak English, so we were like more with hands and fingers gesturing at each other. So I got into their already full car with my gear and my suitcase. I had it on my lap. I was sitting in the back. And at some point, we drove along the fjords. And I was like, what stupid stuff did you just do? Nobody knows where you are. If they just go, you know what? You stay here, we take your gear and we drive off,
Yeah.
nobody will know. But it was all good. They were friendly. They got me to Lofoten Islands. But boy, when I arrived, I was like, damn, what a trip. And the guys who were waiting for me at the airport were like, there was stuff flying all over the place. There were even roofs taken off. We could not believe that plane you were in just even took off to take you there. Yeah, that was my long horror story. It's good for a story now, but back then I thought, oh boy, what am I doing here?
Yeah, those experiences usually are.
Yeah, and the first day I was there, we couldn't get to shoot anything. It was just, I believe, a 4 or 5 day trip, anyways. So I think I ended up with 2 days of shooting,
Mm.
and yeah, now a story to tell.
What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's given you?
Oh, the worst piece of advice I probably forgot because I have no idea. The best piece of advice, photography wise, you mean?
Yeah.
Probably the simple and plain, enjoy what you're doing because, yeah, that's what it's about.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Where do you see photography's place in society?
That's a good one. I think it's an important place for all different aspects to show what there is in the world, to document moments. I think in the past, it has been imagine images of 9/11 in New York,
Mm,
of the Vietnam War, the first person on the moon. Though, and if I name these events in time, you usually have an image in mind.
absolutely.
Images stay with us, they shape our life in a way. Then images are, if I see my daughter, she's 14, she takes selfies a lot, which I'm not a fan of, but that's just culture of youth nowadays, I guess. That's a way to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
That's what they do. They share it with their friends and they share moments, they share what they wear, what they eat. That's what social media is about. And it's evolving also with this difficult times we are in politic wise with fake images. It has the power to really make people insecure. What is there to trust? Photoshop has existed for quite some time, and I think photo manipulation that has happened way before Photoshop.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's nothing
I
new.
think 1908 was one of the first photo manipulations,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it was 10 or 11 years from where film photography started. You
yeah,
had nitrate back in the 1850s, I think, but glass plates and nitrate and all that sort of thing, very difficult to manipulate
yeah,
photos simply because of the gear that you had. But yeah,
yeah,
film and photo manipulation, I think it was about 1908 was one of the very
yeah.
first manipulated photos from memory.
And I think that has led to all people know that photos can be manipulated or now artificially
Generally,
created.
yeah,
So the consensus or the trust is eroding, it's slipping away. And
yeah.
that's probably also a reason why societies get so divided. What is there to believe in? What is there to trust? We start to live in our bubbles, like we are in our photography bubble, then there's people in their political bubble, and
Yep.
it's more us against them. And that's not a good thing. It's
No,
probably this consensus, this is right, this is wrong, slipping away because you never know what is there to what is actually real. People start to believe that the earth is flat again, which is unbelievable. But if people try really hard to persuade you that no, this is not what you think, this is not a table, this is actually a chair, and they show you images of that, or they start interacting this more in your bubble turns that way too, people lose faith in the belief.
absolutely.
And it's also, I think that's a bad thing for photography also. People start questioning, oh yeah, how much did you manipulate here? That sunrise wasn't there. You exchanged the sky. And it
Yeah,
somehow devalues what you're doing.
yeah,
Again, that's maybe a piece of advice for the listener. Again, try to listen to your own voice and try to create those images to make yourself happy. If you know what's in your image and it makes you happy, then it should be good enough.
yeah,
Don't depend on external validation
yeah.
because it's getting more and more difficult to get that.
Yeah, I have absolutely no problem with people doing composite work or
Mm.
even photo manipulation for art, the fine art architecture sort of stuff where the sky
Mhm.
is basically replaced with a gradient or
Yeah.
a vector render or something like that. Those sorts of things, absolutely fine. They look great if they're done well, and all power to the people that actually spend the time in the technical craft of
Yeah,
crafting an art image. I've got no problem. But if you're going out into the world and saying, this is what I actually saw when it's not, that's where
yeah,
the problems start. So to
yeah,
me, it's about the transparency and the honesty of the people who are actually posting those images on social media or
yeah.
putting them out into the world and saying, oh, I was there and I saw this amazing rainbow with unicorns over the Grand Canyon.
Absolutely. I'm
Did
with
you?
you. And it's coming back to trust and belief. I refuse to accept that a lie is normal nowadays.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you get the feeling like it's becoming the new norm. I'm
Mm.
not naming any famous politicians here now, but we all have an idea probably. And I refuse to accept that lying is okay. That's not how I bring up my children. And I'm
Mm.
exactly like you are. I think it's fine if you do that, but be honest about it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that honesty and transparency is the key, and
Yeah.
it's where
Yeah.
people are being
Yeah.
dishonest or even disingenuous with
Yeah.
other people and saying, "Hey, this is actually a photo," when it's not.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's where I draw the line and say, no,
True.
you're really stretching the truth now. But the problem being, it's very hard to detect in some cases.
It is.
Yeah,
And the more people get away with that, and maybe even win prestigious contests,
yeah,
the more people will follow. Because that 15 minutes of fame that Andy Warhol was proclaiming already, when was it?
exactly.
Mid 70s, probably, when I was born. That's still appealing to many.
Absolutely, absolutely. What's your favorite thing about being a photographer?
It's the creative side. It's to get inspired and to blend this into my own work and how I record moments of time, like we said earlier, and things that I see, maybe to turn the mundane, the piece of mud that I'm seeing in front of me, to turn it into something special that, in my eyes, has a soul and
Yeah,
maybe opens up something within the viewer. And I love having the chance to create pieces of work other people not only find appealing, but they start coming up with their own interpretations that they like to spend some time with, have a feeling of themselves. And I find it so interesting when some people look at my work and go, "Oh, I see this and that." And this makes my mind click because I remember a moment when I had this, or that sparks some inspiration inside me. And I think that's the ultimate compliment. If you have somebody spend time with your work and be inspired themselves, maybe to create something completely different, I think that's perfect. That's
yeah.
that's what I cherish as a human being, to be inspired by others. And if I can give some of that back, that's perfect. If I could paint better, I would probably be a painter. I've dipped my toes into that and I tried painting with acrylics, but I wasn't too good and too happy with how I did that. And I
Mm.
think photography felt easier. I had faster results, better results with that, and I found more fulfillment there. Yeah, and that again is what makes me happy.
I
Also
think
with music, music has, like I said at the very beginning, music has always been the main thing for me and probably will always be before photography actually, because
wow.
I think there's even more emotion in there. There are songs that can make me cry in specific moments.
Mm.
There's hardly any images that made me cry, maybe almost to tears for the good reasons. But music has even a stronger emotional impact, and I truly cherish that. And if I can get close to that with my own photography, that's awesome.
I'm usually crying because I'm not the one that took that photo.
Yeah, that can happen too.
What's the worst thing about being a photographer?
That people, is that some people ask you, "Oh, great photo. What camera are you using?" I think Guy Tal in his book More Than a Rock, he was having this comparison. If you go into a good restaurant and you're having a fine meal, and the
Mm.
first thing you ask is, "Oh, what oven are you having?"
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds so silly
What
because nobody
frying
does
pan?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But some people reduce photography only into the tools you're using instead of what you're actually seeing, and
Yeah.
that's what I sometimes feel like, oh, that's not what photography is.
That's my favorite question. I love it when people ask me that. That's okay.
I have a colleague at work when he sees an image of mine, he goes, "Oh, is that Photoshop?" It's a little sticker on the image.
No,
No, that's is fake and this is bullshit. So just turn it away.
yeah.
I'm like, it's one of my tools that I'm using to edit. And that person's not interested in having the
No,
information anyways.
no, that's
So
right.
not worth discussing.
No. I always answer it with the what camera and lens I've used. Mind you, I use on social media. I usually post those details anyway to just
Have it out of the way.
out of the way. Nobody
Yeah,
should ask the question, but then we all know nobody reads the captions anyway. So,
true.
but when I do get it, I always say I use this camera, etc., and 35 years of experience.
Good one. Yeah, very good one. Exactly. And even more years of inspiration.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've only got another couple of questions for you. Are there any photographers out there that I should be talking to?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know if you already had him. Guy Tall is always a good
No,
one to talk to.
I haven't had him yet.
When I think of the photographers that I find really inspiring, I know you had Hans Strand.
Mhm.
He's a great photographer, also a great person.
Yeah.
I got a chance to meet him once. I always loved the work of Alex Noriega
Yep.
from the US, also Eric Bennett. He's great. Then let me check before I get his name wrong again. There's a guy from the UK. He's called Anthony Spencer. He's amazing. You should look up his homepage. And if you have a chance to talk to him, I don't remember really hearing him on any podcast, which is a shame because I would love to hear about
Well,
his approach.
I know I've got a few people for the first time on the podcast, which is nice to be able to get their
Yeah.
first interview under my belt.
Mhm.
But
He's a professional photographer. I don't know if it's a side gig for him, but he does
yeah,
workshops. And another one who I've just discovered recently, and I shared in my newsletters, is George Calancis. Calancis. I think he's from the US, so it's probably pronounced Calancis. Also great work. Also more small scenes, more abstract scenes, or subtle scenes. And I like that.
fantastic. My final question's one that I've been asking since I think episode two. Episode one was an introduction, so I couldn't really ask myself this question. But I actually put together the stats and released them a couple of episodes ago. So anyone that was listening to that can actually put the numbers together now. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I'm more a classic guy with pizza.
Yeah, fair enough. No, not a
Do
problem.
you?
It's okay. It's not something that I order, but I will happily eat it if it's there. So if it's on the pizza, it stays on the pizza. I eat it, but it's not
I
something.
saw a meme. I don't even know if it's true that for Italians, it's they get angry or mad about this. I've seen that.
I've had a few
I'm
Italians
not.
on the show, and they don't exactly get mad about it, but they definitely don't like it on their pizzas.
Okay, all right.
I
So I'm
believe
more
it
with the
was a
Italians there.
Canadian invention, which sounds really weird because everyone calls it a Hawaiian pizza, the ham, cheese, and
Yeah.
but it was a apparently a Canadian guy in Ontario
Okay.
actually.
Who came up with it? Okay. Yeah. No, not my thing. If it was there and I'm hungry, I'd probably eat it, but I would never choose it myself.
It's been wonderful getting to know you, Kai. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Likewise. Thank you so much. It was
Where
lots of
can,
fun.
thank you. Where can people find your work?
First place and best place is my website. It's
Mhm.
just my name, kaihornung.com.
Awesome.
And feel free to check me out there. You can also check my Instagram, but my homepage is always best.
All right, no problem. I'll make sure there's links in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Photo, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Grant Swinburne and hope to see you out shooting soon.